So everybody has an opinion, but the charts speak the truth. This is Bitcoin on point. No noise, no hype, just the levels, the structure, and what actually matters for Bitcoin. Now, this is a make or break zone. Bitcoin is sitting at a level where trends either continue or they change. Higher timeframes are testing critical structure, whilst the lower timeframes are showing weakness, and price is trapped between buy side and sell side liquidity. So this isn't about prediction, so to speak. This is about recognizing a decision zone before the market makes it obvious. So before we break down the charts, let's zoom out, because the macro backdrop continues to move in Bitcoin's favor even whilst the price is under pressure. Now, according to billionaire Jack Dorsey, he has said that Bitcoin will replace the financial system. It's happening. This isn't a short-term trade idea. This is a statement about directional inevitability. And it actually matters most when markets are uncomfortable, not when they're euphoric. Definitely a signal not to ignore. Now, regulatory pressure is easing, not tightening. Just in. Senator Cynthia Lummis said the Fed's skinny accounts would end crypto debanking. Now, this is critical. Debanking has been one of the biggest structural headwinds for crypto ever since its inception. Removing this friction opens the door for more institutions, more liquidity, more legitimate participation. That's a tailwind, not a headwind, even if price hasn't yet reflected. Good on you, Cynthia Lummis. Now, retail exposure is still expanding. Just in. Robinhood gives away $750,000 worth of Bitcoin to its users. Now, this is the platform actively onboarding and normalizing Bitcoin exposure during a period of consolidation. This is not capitulation behavior. Now, keep this macro context in mind as we go back to the chart. So starting with the monthly time frame, Bitcoin is sitting on an important long-term trend line. So this isn't just another support test. This is a defining moment for the digital asset. We have several points of contact on this trend line in the past, of which the past two occasions have actually led on to new all-time highs. So this is why the monthly chart actually matters the most right now. Zooming out to the higher time frames enables you to make a clearer picture and as to why this trend line is so important for Bitcoin. It will either mark a local low before a new all-time high or a structural change or shift. This trend line could be the most critical for Bitcoin's future in the coming months. Now, on the weekly chart, Bitcoin has already consolidated and actually broken below its ascending support line. What this actually tells us is that momentum is cooling off and the market is no longer in clean expansion mode. Weekly structure has shifted from trending to reactive. And now there is several different pathways that Bitcoin can actually take from this situation. One is to actually resort back up into the trend line to try and reclaim it as support instead of resistance. And the second is that we actually resort back down to the local lows from April of 2025. So there is critical support below waiting for Bitcoin if we see rejection. However, the bulls also have the scenario to step in here where Bitcoin could be building some sort of double bottom base, and the main objective would be reclaiming this trend line and turning it back into support. So we have key support and demand back down at the April lows, which sits roughly at 77 to 78K. However, we do also have this support block, which Bitcoin is actually sitting on right now, which is the previous highs from March and April. So we had this sort of cluster double bottom back in April. Bitcoin broke out and led to a new all-time high. Right now, we've retraced from that all-time high back down to the cluster that was previously resistance and have the opportunity to turn it into support. So this is where the bulls must step in if some sort of double bottom is to build and actually start pushing back to those highs that we've fallen from. Failing that, if we do lose the previous resistance from March and April, then resorting back down to the lows from those same months, is definitely on the cards. Again, weekly structure has shifted from trending into reactive, and we wait for confirmation. Now, on the daily chart, Bitcoin is sitting between sell-side liquidity below and buy-side liquidity above. We evidently have this level of resistance that Bitcoin's been under since the 10th of December, and we also have this higher low ascending support that Bitcoin's been adhering to since late November. Ultimately speaking, right now we're coiling up into this apex, getting really tight into a corner, so it looks like a decision could be made by earliest as the 4th of January, because this is where the apex really gets tightened to, right? The 4th of January, we are likely to see a decision. And this is ultimately a clear compression zone. Markets don't stay balanced like this for long. When price sits between both liquidity pools, the next move is usually decisive. Now, what looks to be happening is if Bitcoin does get this run up into resistance, we potentially could come back down to support. And again, as I said, get really tight into the apex before actually making a decision in which way the daily wants to break. Another situation where we simply wait for confirmation. Now, on the 4-hour chart, it's pretty evident that weakness is clear here. We have these lower high formations since we last ran up into supply at $94,000. And although we are in accumulation, it does look like price could resort back down into the 4-hour support/demand before seeing any imminent reaction. So with these lower highs in place, structure is poor, momentum is fading, and price looks to be leaning lower. Right now, there's only one clear support zone to hold, and this is from the lows where we've tapped in this 4-hour demand in the past, roughly at $84,000. It's critical that this level of support holds, because if it doesn't, short-term downside can accelerate quickly. So when we stack everything together, macro, adoption, and regulation is accelerating quickly. On the monthly time frame, price is at a critical trend line. We could call this the important one, right? Because if Bitcoin does lose this trend line, it would mark a trend shift. However, if it does hold a support, this could be in favor of the bulls stepping into a new all-time high. We wait for confirmation. Now, on the weekly, the trend line has been broken after the consolidation, and we are resorting back down to those lows from March and April in 2025, which has to hold as support. The bulls have defense in the 87K territory, but if that is lost, the potential to sweep back down to the April lows in the low 76 to 77K area is definitely on the cards. Daily, the liquidity is stacked on both sides. We are actually in compression, waiting for the apex and a decision. Simply, once again, waiting for confirmational signals. 4-hour shows weak structure. Let's be honest, we have limited support down here at 84K. And what this is telling us that across the board, this is a high important decision zone. So now that we've wrapped up Bitcoin, let's talk about Ethereum, because Ethereum always sets the tone. And on the daily chart, ETH has already broken its daily trend line. So we had this formation, some sort of rising, broadening wedge, a level of resistance, a level of support, a level of resistance, a level of support. And this support was actually lost on the 15th of December. Now, when ETH did lose this structural trend line, it then came back into its daily demand zone or support zone at $2,700, and we saw a relief rally back into the previous level of support and confirmed it as resistance. So right now there is depleting buying pressure, and it does look like ETH wants to roll over back down into daily support in that 2.7K territory before seeing any further signs of relief or expansion. So although the trend line has broken down, there is the opportunity to form some sort of base back down in this daily support, which is actually holding and has been holding since late November. Now, on the 4-hour time frame, ETH looks very similar to Bitcoin. We have weak structure, choppy price action, and support down below that's actually doing the heavy lifting. And similar to Bitcoin, ETH has this range of accumulation, but with depleting buying pressure and weak candles, this doesn't look very favorable at this moment in time. We did have a breakout from this descending trend line, but ultimately we placed a lower high, and that's what's led us into this weak accumulation sort of phase, okay, where there's chop right now on the lower time frame. It's very important to note that when ETH did get the breakout from its descending resistance, i.e. this black trend line coming down on our heads, we saw the breakout, but it was weak, and ETH ran into a previous level of support. So this is where we was holding support roughly at around 3K. And then when we ran back into it after dropping back into the support zone on the 4-hour, we then confirmed it as resistance. So this previous low that was holding as support, we lost that, ran into demand, ran back into the buy side liquidity, met it as resistance, and have now seen rejection. So with these weak candles in formation, it does look like ETH wants to potentially roll back over into its 4-hour support. And this isn't ETH leading the strength here, right? It's actually confirming the market's hesitation. So macro is strong, but the structure must prove it. This isn't a moment for bias. Bitcoin has strong long-term macro tailwinds, but weakening short-term structure. The weekly time frame has already lost support, and there is demand below that has to hold to validate the bull's potential long-term. So ultimately speaking, although we have the long-term macro tailwinds and weakening short-term structure, both can be true at the same time. We have to wait and let price confirm the direction, let the structure resolve. And remember, your job isn't to predict the breakout or the breakdown, it's to respond correctly once it happens. We simply wait for confirmation. Now, if you want to support the channel, the links below are there for you. You can trade on the platform we use, get fee discounts and bonuses. It's completely optional, but it really helps the channel grow. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next update.